So this is the BA100 satisfaction survey that you should have uploaded and be seeing in your Qualtrics account. So what we're going to do is show you some basic summarization of the results of the 78 completed survey. So I'm going to show you. One is to generate a tally, or meaning simply developing frequency distribution as well as percent distribution for each of the survey questions. And then I'm also going to demonstrate how to construct a cross-tabulation of two variables where we are going to cross-tabulate a demographic information or demographic question against a research question. So let's go ahead and take a look at the responses. So I'm going to click on Data and Analysis. So you'll see here that 78 responses were uploaded onto this survey. All right, so first let's look at the very basic reporting that Qualtrics will do automatically on your survey. So let's click on Reports option here. And you will note that on the left side is the listing of the different survey questions. So if I click on a particular question, for example, what is your student classification, you will note that Qualtrics will give you a histogram or a bar chart of the student classification. So in this particular question, this is a choose one, or only one response is applicable. So you note here that across the horizontal axis is the frequency. Qualtrics will also report certain statistics like this. You'll see the minimum value, maximum value, average, standard deviation, variance, and count. Now note that this particular question, your student classification, is a nominal or classification variable only, such that really these numbers here are meaningless. So recall that we talked about the levels of data measurement, that you can compute averages or standard deviations only on interval or ratio scale type questions, meaning if you have a question that yields or elicits a measured or an answer that is measured. For example, if you ask the age of the respondent, the exact age, that is an example of a ratio type of question. In that sense, you can compute averages or standard deviations. But for categorical variables like student classification, where Qualtrics assign a code to each of the responses. So you'll see here that the minimum value is 1 because it assigns a code to each of these responses as 1, 2, 3, and 4. That really the average and standard deviation are meaningless. So what we typically do what we would typically do is we will remove that visualization from the report because that's a meaningless information. Okay, so now we have two sets of summaries. One is the visual, and then the other is the numeric reporting, where you have the frequency and the percent distribution. So recall in your survey mapping, when you try to say, all right, going for this variable, here's the summary statistics that I'm going to generate, like a percent. Now, that would be these numbers here. Okay? So that would be for question 2. So if you scroll through each of the questions you have in your survey, that, again, you can eliminate information that is not meaningful. So clear this up, remove that visualization, and you go through that, go through all these questions and clean up your summarized information. Once you have cleaned up the summarized information, you can now share your report in various forms, meaning you can import or export these reports in various forms for further processing, if you will. So you can export the report in a PDF document, a Word document, PowerPoint slides, or you can export the raw data. Or you can do a CSV, comma-separated value in Excel. All right. So this is where really the survey mapping is important, so that when you sit down and try to develop the summary statistics, you know exactly what you're trying to achieve or to obtain from Qualtrics. If you don't have the survey mapping, that's fine too, as long as you know exactly what what you're aiming to produce in your Qualtrics report. Okay, so let me go back to the visualizations that Qualtrics show as far as tallying or tabulating each of the variables, each of the questions in your survey. So if you click on the, say, this horizontal axis, note that the horizontal axis here represents the frequencies, or the number, the counts, how many responded from the Ashland Monday, how many responded from the Ashland Saturday and the online section. Now, sometimes you would want to represent this maybe in a percent number instead, like this, okay? The percentages instead of the counts. You can also change the kind of visual that you can represent this question. So if we click on anywhere on the horizontal axis, now you have this on this right side, various options for showing the visual. So right now, the visualization is a bar chart. Sometimes, depending on the data that you're dealing with, you can also represent the visual in terms of a line chart, or maybe a pie chart, or breakdown bar, or statistics table. All right, so explore. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. The only way really that, well, not the only way, but one way of learning how to use Qualtrics is by just doing trial and error. So let me change the visual to a pie chart. Okay, here you go. So here's the pie chart, and it's showing the shares as percentages. You can change the radius, make it smaller, the inner radius, or make it bigger. You can change the different colors depending on what is the best way of representing your data. So, at this point, it's really up to you to determine what is the best visual for the summary information that you are presenting. You can change the decimals. Right now, it's 2 decimals. Sometimes it's probably best to just do either 1 decimal or even 0 decimal place. And then make sure that you include a title to your chart. So this one, you can say this one is maybe the section of responding student. So keep in mind that when you are creating a visual, that it should have enough information to let the respondent know. I mean, if somebody is reading your visual, that this person will know exactly what that visual is conveying, even without you explaining to that person what the numbers represent. Okay, so that's an example of generating visuals or numbers out of your survey. Okay, now, so we talked about tabulating each question by itself. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to create cross-tabulations. A cross-tabulation is when you try to relate 2 survey questions. You can actually relate more than 2 survey questions, but try to avoid that because the more variables you try to cross-tabulate or relate, that it becomes really difficult to interpret. So let's just do a cross-tabulation where typically you would want to cross-tabulate a demographic question against a research question. Okay, so what are the demographic questions in the survey? Well, one of them is the section where the student or respondent belongs within. Or, student classification is another demographic information. Or which of the following describes you in terms of a transferee or non-transfer student. So let's say that I'm interested in comparing responses of the students by classification and then cross-tabulate that against a research question, maybe this rating of level of agreement to each of the following statements. So to do a cross-tabulation, we'll go back to the Data Analysis tab, and then you can select the Cross Tabs option. Okay. For more advanced statistical analysis, you can select this Stats IQ. But let's keep it simple for now. Let's just do the cross-tabulation. Okay, so I'm going to select that. So here you go again. You'll see the listing of the questions in the survey on the left side. And you'll have two areas where you can put columns. So what would represent your columns and what would represent your rows. Now, typically, the columns would be the demographic question, okay? Or what we call in research, this would be maybe the independent variable. So I'm going to select, I think I said that we were going to, the student classification. We want to compare responses of the students by year level and how they responded to the research question of overall satisfaction with the Likert scale questions pertaining to satisfaction. So I'm going to click on the, what is your student classification question, and I'll drag that into the columns. Okay. Next, in the rows or stubs, I'm going to click on the rating of level of agreement to each of the following statements. Note that this is a group of statements where the respondent will reply either strongly agree or strongly disagree with each of the statements. I'm going to click that. All right, now I have here question 2, student classification, and we need to tell Qualtrics what we want to show in the cross-tabulation table. So again, this is where your pro forma table will be useful as a guide to determine what kind of information you are going to show in the table. And for us, we are going to compute column percentages. Okay? Column percentages. Now, question is, why column percentages? Well, the column percentages here is the most appropriate. In fact, it's the only correct way of representing the percentages compared to row percent or total percent, because we are comparing the responses of the student among the student levels. Okay, so you'll see here that as far as this particular statement, which is, it's a little bit, you don't see the statements clearly here, but you'll see that all the respondents, all 78, here's the percent distribution. And students, according to their classification, you'll see the percent distributions here. So here's the demographic profile of the students. And on the rows, you have the research questions pertaining to the satisfaction level. Now, you can, as you see, that it's really not a good representation of the summary information at this point. But let's take a look at a better visual of the summary reports. We are going to export this cross-tabulation to Excel. So you see here that this particular group of cross-tabulations has been exported into Excel. So here it is. Here's the Excel output. Okay. Now you can see here the question, strong, BA100 has made helped me make friends and connections. This particular set of responses has helped me adjust to college life quicker. All right. So there's still some cleanup to do here, in the sense that you probably would want to say here, in here, say BA100 has helped me make friends and connections. And then you can replace these, simply delete this extra information. So when you create your report later on, or use this output. Okay, so how come it's not allowing me to delete? Let's see, deleting that. All right, so you can delete the extraneous information to make your summary more presentable. So I hope that helps. And again, I would encourage you to play with or do a hands-on practice. Even if at this point you don't yet have data from your survey, but use this BA100 example to generate tabulations, frequency distributions, as well as cross tabulations.